Other than the effects, do you have anything you unapologetically could say you liked about Rings of Power? I'm not trying to defend the show. I was not sober for it. There were elements that I thought had a lot of potential. So I think a lot of people liked Elrond and Durin the dwarf. I think people really liked him, and even Disa, their storyline. I think they wanted more of that, actually. But I think it was very disappointing as it progressed, the whole storyline with the Mithril, which really didn't amount to anything. All of like Elrond's actions with the dwarves in regards to the Mithril didn't mean anything because he just used the small amount of sample Mithril that Durin gave him, and that was what they used for the 3 rings. But you had this whole season of trying to establish good relations so that they can mine Mithril for them. So I think people liked the dwarves, although some of his dialogue was very, very cringy. I think y'all remember the "give me the meat and give it to me raw." Someone actually said and wrote and thought and green-lighted that to go in the show. But yeah, I think people like that as far as their favorite storylines. They like the dwarves and they liked Elrond, although Elrond as a speechwriter was not that great. But when he was with Durin, I think they liked that connection. And I thought the actor was good. Him and Disa were good. You could just sense how much potential was wasted as far as the storyline, like a well thought out storyline. And at the end of season 1, it just felt a lot of it was meaningless. It didn't mean anything because he just used the small amount of Mithril that he initially gave him to use for the ring. So yeah, the dwarves were good. Yeah, and their makeup was good. I just have the small nitpicks when it comes to the female dwarves. Disa wasn't really giving me the vibe of a female dwarf there. They gave her like little sideburn hair, maybe. Yeah, the dwarves are probably the only parts I like. I think it will probably be the same this time around. As far as what I could tell of the trailer footage with the dwarves, I think people will like that too. Except if the Balrog is Durin's Bane and all that, which doesn't belong in this timeline or this age. But apart from that, just the prosthetics. I thought Adar was good. I was rooting for the orcs. Mithril comes from lightning. Does that sound stupid? Anyway, it's totally canon now. And that's a whole other can of worms. What it was the explanation, it was a lost Silmaril was the origin for Mithril. Like they made up this complete original thing, and I don't know how the Tolkien estate was okay with it because Tolkien wrote in a lot of detail in regards to the Silmarils. There wasn't a lost Silmaril. So many of those things that are just like, it's just a reimagining, and that's what you have to think about it. We have names and places and certain events that are complete mishmash of that and done in a way that's been reimagined according to Payne and McKay, who have virtually no experience writing, much less running a show like this. One of the most expensive shows with one of the most beloved IPs ever. I'm not expecting much when it comes to Galadriel and a lot of the storylines that they established in season 1, so I think it's interesting how they're not sure about season 3. Honestly, it would be an improvement if Rings of Power was just non-stop swords and bow and axe fighting and they didn't try to do more lore. Why did we need to see an origin for Mithril? Why? It's like you went out of your way to bastardize the lore that Tolkien established when you didn't need to. There was a lot of stuff like that you changed things just cuz. Like, and you can't even have a reason when it comes to, oh, it's just too dense. Then why does Isildur have a sister that he didn't have? There's just a lot of choices like that have nothing to do with difficulties and adapting as far as like all of this huge time period. They're just like made these changes just because. And this is just complications when it comes to this particular production because they don't have the rights to adapt Tolkien's stories of the First and Second Age. So they have no choice but to rely on whatever's in the appendices from the Lord of the Rings books. But when it comes to anything that's going to touch what Tolkien actually wrote about this, that's not in the appendices, that's in other works, they don't have the rights to that, so they have to make it up. And I don't know why that's preferred by the Tolkien estate, but it is what it is. They're just giving them breadcrumbs to work with. When you have a show based off these huge eras that spanning thousands and thousands of years. I mean, it's a tough situation to be in anyways, but I feel like if they went smaller, at a smaller scale, they could have done it well, just depending on what kind of story they want to tell, but you don't have to do all of it. And I just feel like they're very greedy in all of the major events. They want all of the major events leading up to the Third Age, but it's just so much. And really, the scale is too great. Yeah, definitely lazy writing. I definitely get the sense that they're relying on just flash over substance. The pretty visuals. I mean, we're getting barrel whites, we're getting the Balrog again, and I just feel like they're trying to have the feelings that fans get that imagery invokes. That we love the Balrog from, Peter Jackson's trilogy. And fans didn't get to see Tom Bombadil, so we have Tom Bombadil now. And there's just a lot of things like that. It feels like they're just trying to do too much and rely on that, kind of like stunts almost, as opposed to just trying to be faithful and sincere when it comes to adapting Tolkien's stories, at least trying to live up to the spirit of it. And that's why I think that they should have gone smaller in scale, choosing a particular event to center the entire show on, and then carefully crafting that and developing that. Now we're like all over the place, and doing that, it makes it feel so small because people are just quick traveling all around. That was another problem that season 1 had. We just jump around and people are just traveling around like there's no sense of scale. You get no sense of how big this world is. Spectacle over substance, exactly. One of the problems is it seems like time is different for the different players. The Dwarf Elf storyline has to take months longer than the Southlands/Orc story and the Numenor/Galadriel arc. The sense of time was, all over the place. It kind of felt like The Last Jedi in that regard. You don't know what's going on, sense of time for any area and how it kind of connects. And that's another problem too, with just trying to have too much going on. Oh, but we gotta have Harfoots. We gotta have hobbits. It's a Middle Earth story. We gotta have the Southlands. We gotta have Numenor. It's just so many things, and it makes everything seem small, ironically. And yeah, there's no sense of time. I don't think they even said what age we're in, what year it is. It feels very similar to the approach of like Star Wars now under Dave Filoni. We never get a sense of what the year is, what the actual timeline is. I think Andor was the only one that had a year in its actual starting frame, so you know the context and know where we are in the storyline. Nothing was consistent in that regard, and stuff like that matters. Sense of scale, that was such an important part of Peter Jackson's film trilogy. We see the Fellowship crossing over these huge landscapes and sweeping landscapes, and you really got the sense of like months at least were passing by. You really felt that. Stuff like that matters. It just feels like they're so lazy, or they just want to get to the good stuff. We want to get to the battles, so let's just quick travel. And it seemed like, was it Celebrimbor and Elrond, when they got to the Khazad-dûm, that it took them like an afternoon, like a stroll. And they wanted all of it. They wanted all of Arda. That was their pitch to Amazon. We're going to do all of it. We're going to see this whole thing. Even Favreau and Filoni can't tell people how much time passes between Mando seasons. Clueless. Oh, I forgot that. And again, with Andor, I think Tony Gilroy came out and said that they're doing 12 episodes again, but that every 3 episodes there was going to be a jump in time so that they can eventually lead up to Rogue One. So I think it's like 3 years or maybe 5 years they're trying to condense into season 2. At least he has a grasp for like the timeline and what we're doing and what the plan is. So again, just someone who actually is competent and knows how important time is, and especially in a world-building IP like this, how important it is. That was the problem with the sequel trilogy too. Everything was about just getting to the next action scene. Yeah, and I think especially with The Last Jedi, again with like the differences in time, this was set against a backdrop of like a race against time. The rebels were fleeing the First Order and they were being chased essentially, and it also felt like time was being dragged out for Rey's storyline with Luke. It felt like just at least days was passing by, but the sense of time seemed extremely urgent when you're with the rebel fleet. So it was very jarring and inconsistent. And yeah, with Finn and Rose Tico's storyline, that was, I don't know. The most expensive looking thing was Elf's tied faded haircut. I liked Arondir, and I thought he was fine, but it's a modern haircut. I can't get into it. No one looks like they should. I mean, he needs longer, natural looking hair. I mean, what barber are you going to that you have a razor like cut finish to your hair like this fade? It prevents immersion when no one looks like they should. So Elrond, Elrond looks like a young hobbit, even in this one. Celebrimbor looks like a hobbit. He doesn't look like an elf. And Galadriel, if her hair covers her ears, she just looks like a regular human chick. She does not look as stately and ethereal as she should. If you told me if you cover her ears, you told me she was a human, yeah, I get it. I could totally see that. And every picture that I see with her ears covered, she just looks like a human. Most of the elves look like that. No one looks like they should look. You have dwarves that also kind of look like hobbits. You have elves that look like hobbits. You have elves that look like humans. And it all just, even these little touches, it may seem trivial for him to have short hair and have this modern haircut. But it's another one of those things, like a sense of time and a sense of scale. It's just another one of those things that helps become immersed into this world. That's the whole point of stories like this and fantasy stories like this, to escape into another world. And little things like this, really, they're not little. They all add up to immersion, to the world building of it. So I say that it's not a big deal, but it is. Hairstyles and elves looking like elves, especially with Galadriel. I'm sorry, she just doesn't look like Galadriel. She looks so ordinary. And nothing against Morphic Clark. I think she's fine, she's attractive, whatever, but she's not Galadriel. She does not look like she was born in the light of the two trees. She doesn't look like her hair should look. She doesn't look stately. She doesn't look tall. She doesn't look ethereal. She doesn't evoke that feeling of awe that you should have when you look at her.